He's Wil Masisak, storyteller extraordinaire.
And she's Emily Lutzker, culture vulture.
And this is the Aceys Artist Choice Podcast. The Aceys are the Artist Choice Awards, inclusive awards recognizing achievements in film as voted upon by people working in the arts.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the podcast where we talk about films, film performances, artistic people, and the weird stuff that we think of when it comes to those things. And with me this time, for the first time this year on the podcast, is the co-founder of the Aceys Artist Choice organization. It's Emily Lutzker. Emily, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to talk about the films that have been nominated for this year's Acey Awards.
As am I. We have a couple of great guests coming up shortly, but the third annual Aceys nominations are out into the world. Can you believe it? Third year already.
So exciting. And we've got 26 categories this year, full of nominees.
And of the 73 films nominated, there's no way on earth we can talk about all of them in this 1 hour podcast. But let me start the conversation by saying to you, Emily, what were the highlights for you in terms of the films of 2017?
There were a lot of moments in film that stood out for me this year. Of course, I loved Columbus because I love architecture, but I really liked how they used the architecture itself to tell the story. The sort of way that you could see into buildings or not see into buildings or move through rooms like people were kind of moving through life or interacting with each other. The way that they concealed or revealed what was happening in the story and the relationship with the characters. It was just gorgeous and really well thought out. I also like the square because I love the art world, and what I thought was so great about that film was how it showed us how we're all living in our little bubbles, whether it's the museum bubble or whether it's, our sort of roundabout trying to get through life bubble or the thing that we're just focused on in that moment, like how everybody ran for the dining room as soon as food was served and didn't want to hear, what the chef was presenting. I really liked that film in a lot of ways, how it was just a kind of slice of what we see, whether it's the thing that people want us to see or not. And it was funny. And maybe the third film that stood out for me is Mother. I thought it was sort of the most profound film of the year, really, in terms of Aronofsky's kind of body of work that he's made. I think it's kind of an important film, a sort of allegory of what it's like to be a woman. I thought it was just remarkable that he could capture that in a way. Of course, thinking of it in those terms wasn't necessarily what he thought about when he was making it, but it was really such a powerful film and a hard film to watch, like his films are.
Yeah, well, we are going to talk about all of those, I think, at some point.
So since you're the music expert, I'm really curious about what you think about some of the musicals that were nominated this year, musical or musical subject. We've got some interesting ones, and they are Beauty and the Beast, Coco, Folk Hero and Funny Guy, The Greatest Showman, and Patty Cakes.
It's funny, like last year, all everybody wanted to talk about was La La Land. That was the sort of the year of the musical at the forefront of a conversation about films. I liked the film Sing Street and a couple of other things last year that were sort of musically oriented. This year, it's weird. It's like the big film is Coco that everybody wanted to talk about. And while I sort of appreciate the very broad audience Disney film in all its glory that Coco is, and it's a big thing for Latin American culture and this kind of thing. I don't know. I kind of felt like it wasn't a big year for like the musicals, like out and out musicals, like you would think of traditionally what musicals would be. But I think a film like Patty Cakes, which isn't necessarily what most people might think of as a musical, where they break into song, in the middle. It still has songs that are a big part of telling the story about the film, which I liked a lot. And then you have things like The Greatest Showman and Beauty and the Beast that are more traditional musicals, and then Folk Hero and Funny Guy, which is, about a musician with songs in it. Just felt it was a little bit of a different kind of a year. Somebody's with us. Who's with us?
It's Paul.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
I don't know who these people are. Who are you?
It's Emily and Wil.
Wow! Oh my gosh! Wow! It's like a double whammy.
Yeah, exactly.
Of greatness.
Yes, we are. In fact, that's how we generally refer to ourselves when we're introducing ourselves. We are a double whammy of greatness. This is Emily and Wil you're talking to, and with us is an artist. And I know you're going after your advanced degree in curmudgeonry, and I think you're pretty far along.
No, not anymore. After our last conversation, I got a lot of bad feedback.
You did not. I loved it. I thought you were our podcast star.
No, I told him
Really?
it was Wil. Wil brought it out, and that I'll try to be nicer. So I blamed you, Wil. Sorry.
Oh, great.
No. Actually, I got good feedback. People enjoyed it. I did get a couple of people that said, "Wow, why don't you lighten up or something?" But I don't think I was that bad.
Oh, you were great. You were great. Oh,
We really thought you were great.
Oh, thanks.
so Wil just told me that I have to introduce you properly.
Well, yeah, because you didn't get a chance to introduce them last time.
So with us today is Paul Evans, who's an artist and a curator who...
I was okay with going after an advanced degree in curmudgeonry. I think that's fine.
So with us today is Paul Evans, who's an artist and curator and going after his advanced degree in curmudgeonly.
Actually, he's a recovering curmudgeon.
A recovering curmudgeon.
And a recovering curator.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now that you're recovering, Paul and I talked on episode 1 this season about things we hate about films, which turned out to be a really fun podcast conversation. But now we get down to the nominations and the things that are what people thought were the good things that might include some things we didn't like as well. But in general, I mean. I know you've had a chance to see what the results were of the nominations, and some films that we talked about: The Shape of Water, Get Out, I, Tonya, Call Me by Your Name, Phantom Thread. These were the films that got the most nominations. Shape of Water leading the way with 10 nominations, but Columbus, which is a film that not only you liked, but that I really liked.
And I loved it.
Did get 7 nominations as well. So it's sort of a mixture of what you might expect and what you might not expect. What was your take in general on the nominations? Did we do good at the Aceys?
Yeah, they were very, I don't want to say diverse, but, there was definitely some familiar, things. But I was really happy that Columbus was there. And I think, your categories are good, meaning like you had one that was like obscure something or other, right? Or like
obscure. Yes, the obscure something or other category, which
unappreciated, obscure, supporting something.
We did a couple of things. I think that that were sort of inspired, when we first imagined the Aceys. One of them was we decided not to have a separation betwart male and female.
Nice.
Why?
In terms of acting awards.
In terms of acting awards, why limit that? And we've got art house or limited release. So specifically things that
were smaller films,
that were smaller films,
or
because
not
sometimes
seen as many people,
they get just dwarfed by the larger films. And the other one, we combined short with experimental.
You're probably the only people who do that.
Yeah, it's like I feel like you'd have to have a special experimental film junkie people to be interested in such a thing. But it was speaking of that category, it was sort of an interesting year for that. It was a year where there's, I don't know, did you see Rat Film or Manifesto or these things?
No.
So, Emily, tell us about Manifesto, because I know this is a film that you saw early on. It was part of an art installation. I don't know where you saw it exactly and all that business, but...
So I was lucky enough to see Manifesto in the original installation at the Park Avenue Armory in New York. So it was presented as an art exhibition, and it was amazing. Basically, it was, I believe... 8 screens that were going simultaneously with shorter pieces of the film that were timed so perfectly, and they were all featuring Cate Blanchett, and she was different characters reciting art manifestos over the years. So, and it's at at different points they would sync up and they would diverge, and then they would come back together.
And that's a very sort of like art exhibit thing to do, right? So it's funny that they kind of turned it into a cinema experience.
Right. So Julian Roosevelt, who was the director, creator of this, he then went and edited it down, and it was definitely at Sundance, and it was in a couple of theaters also released, as a feature length. And I wonder in a way like why he did that. That's sort of, if it was an art installation, why he went and made it into a feature length film. I have no idea, but it was.
Probably to make some of the money back.
Exactly. Maybe to make the money back, or maybe to qualify for the Acey Awards. Maybe this is it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just going to say about Rat Film that it's it's sort of ostensibly a documentary, but it starts off with talking about the city and about the unseen parts of it and rats that are a live and living, vibrant part of the hidden part of the city. But it sort of goes all over the place. It's an interesting sort of adventure where it turns into experimental film just because it's hard to categorize exactly what it is. It reminds me a little in that way of Heart of a Dog, the Laurie Anderson film, where it's about a lot of stuff and it covers a lot of ground, but it's just more like something you would go to Film Forum and see. It's just like this sort of weird experience without too many expectations.
I think everything reminds you of Heart of a Dog.
No, just Heart of a Dog and movies like it. Paul, what were you going to say? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was going to say I did remember hearing about Manifesto, and I guess when you have someone like Cate Blanchett in it, I guess it sort of behooves you to maybe have it go wide in terms of release. I don't know. If no one was in it, it was just a pure experimental film, it probably wouldn't have gotten any theater release.
Yeah, probably more like some theater or distributor approached them and were like, hey, we could turn this into a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Film Forum would show it in those places and Anthology Film Archives and whatever. And there's nothing wrong with Cate Blanchett doing that. I don't know. But if it was good, then it doesn't matter, right?
Exactly. And so while we're talking about this, just to get the whole category, this is the outstanding film, short or experimental, the short film Black Holes, which is a really fun adventure. That's a sort of a stop action animation deal with an astronaut who goes into space. It has a lot of poking and prodding done to him as part of his training that turns out to be sort of disturbing for him and for us as the viewer. But that was a really, really fun short film. In a Heartbeat, which is kind of intended to pull at the heartstrings, kind of animation, big budget animation thing. My Nephew Emmett, which is a documentary film about Emmett Till and what happened to him during the Civil Rights Movement, and sort of a heavy, it's a completely opposite end of the spectrum from Black Holes. And I know, Emily, you saw the 11 O'Clock.
Right. It's a narrative about a psychiatrist and his 11 o'clock appointment. The 11 o'clock appointment, he thinks he's a psychiatrist.
So it's like one of those things that high concept. When they say high concept film, this is what we're talking about. Something you can explain in one sentence that makes you want to see the film, right? So, anyway, so Paul, start. What category interests you? I'll read the nominees and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
I think you're the art house or limited release expert. I mean, the question is how many of those did you see?
So they are. Oh, you can read them. Here.
Okay. A Fantastic Woman, Brigsby Bear, Columbus, Patty Cakes, Personal Shopper, The Salesman, The Square, and Thelma.
Thelma.
That's actually. It's filmed by Joachim Trier, who is, I think, Norwegian, and it's a sort of a psychological horror film, but it's very beautiful and extremely Scandinavian. So that makes it a good fit for the art house films. He's the director that did Oslo August 31st, which was a sort of very depressing Scandinavian film.
I did see Fantastic Woman.
Yes, I want to know what you think of that one. Because that was in the theaters for a short amount of time, and I know that within the next few days it comes out on Amazon. It's available to watch, but I didn't really notice it out there in the theaters. I mean, but that's my fault.
It was playing nearby, and I had a gift certificate, so I used it for that, and. I absolutely loved it. Yeah.
So tell us about it. It's a Chilean film, but I mean, some people are going to be familiar with it, but it's not that high profile here.
Yeah, which is strange. It's a very slow film, right?
What's it about?
It's about death and grieving. In 2 words, that's what it's about. A transsexual woman's boyfriend suddenly dies, and she has to deal with that. And that's really what the movie's about. I think people think it's about other things, and it's kind of over the top, Almodovar-esque, martyr weirdness, surreal, blah blah. And it's just a sweet, sad movie about grieving. Isn't that corny?
Yeah, it's a good time date movie for the weekend.
It's a good. But it's actually, what I loved about it was, and this was something that kind of hit me afterwards, it was about, and I don't want to sound, like a cornball, but I am trying to change my ways. It was about the power of art. Can you believe I just said that? It's about the power
Wow.
of art. I know.
Wow.
I know.
That was almost Disney out here.
That was the cheesiest thing I think I've heard you say to this point. Yeah. Very possible.
But it's really well done. It's again, it's slow. It's really nicely filmed, and it's one of those movies that kind of screws with your expectations as it's sort of progressing. You're not entirely sure where it's going to go. If it's going to be this kind of sob story, or if it's going to be about whatever. So I like that it kind of screwed with my expectations, which I think we touched on before. When we spoke. And I wanted to say, can I go off on a tangent?
Please.
Oh,
sure.
I noticed that, this is what I noticed about your awards. You singled out, or not you, but Melanie Lynskey was singled out for that movie she did on Netflix.
Yeah, I don't feel at home in this world anymore.
Yeah. Loved that film. She was so great in it. That was a good one. So I was glad that popped up because I don't quite understand the whole Netflix versus release and how that all figures out into awards and movie theaters versus streaming. I don't know, but that was
the way the snobbery works.
yeah, right. But that was a nice little independent movie that kind of reeked of independent movie, and also showed a very strong female character that was not. She didn't pull any punches, and she was tough, and it was great. I thought that was really
good. We like this. We like to support this kind of character. Speaking of strong female characters and the power of art, I think joining us, I'm pretty sure, is the performance artist and professional talker, Thadra Sheridan. Are you there with us?
I am here. I have to warn you, I am an absolute Luddite, and I could not figure out how to get my computer to dial the telephone, so I'm on my actual phone, which has been having problems.
Which is the one that was having problems, exactly.
Yeah, there might be some audio issues, which I apologize in advance for.
I'm on my actual phone too, so it's okay. I'm more of a Luddite than you, and I don't know you.
I don't know about that.
So, Thadra, you're on with Paul Evans, who you might have heard on the podcast before, and with Emily Lutzker, recovering professional artist. We're all recovering from something. Paul is a recovering curmudgeon. Emily's a recovering artist. And what am I recovering? I'm recovering a sofa, I think, sometime later this week. Thadra, what are you recovering from?
I don't know, just life, I think.
You're recovering from trying to use your computer to make a phone call.
Yeah, I really am, yeah. I mean, I've done it before. I don't know why it's not working this time, but I think I should have given myself an extra hour to get that set up before this.
It could be. So we just got dabbling into some other questions about different things, but we have yet to hear from Thadra about what Thadra thinks about films this year. What tell me about something that you really liked or didn't like about movies this year, because it would be a great place to start.
Oh, something I really liked or didn't like. Well, I mean, I think there was a really great spectrum of stuff. There were certainly movies I very much didn't like this year, and several that I did. But I'm a big fan of when you go to a movie in the theater, I really enjoy the cheesy, obnoxious, gigantic movies. I have a friend that that's kind of an outing for us. So I was very excited that there was a John Wick 2, a Fast and Furious, and a Triple X this year. I just wanted to get those movies in the conversation, just because they also came out this year.
Oh, no, I got to say, John Wick in the Keanu Reeves action film is like a guilty pleasure of mine, so I can relate to that.
Absolutely. And
I think
we counted the people he killed, and it was hard because there were foggy parts. So we were actually off by a couple, but we got pretty close. And it worked out to less than 1 a minute for the movie.
I think out of those 3 films, unfortunately, maybe it's a disappointment to you. Only one of them was nominated for an Acey Award, which is John Wick, which got a nomination for Outstanding Stunt Ensemble.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
For our conversation
I
earlier.
assure you that I nominated all 3, but I felt like for stunt ensemble, I would have probably gone for Fast and Furious or Triple X. He punches a guy in the face with a motorcycle in that movie. I mean,
not something you see every day, exactly. I will say this. This is a little piece of trivia for you, Thadra, and that is that although it didn't get John Wick 2 did not get a nomination for excellence in editing, the editor of John Wick 2 did get an excellence in editing nomination for Atomic Blonde, Elizabeth Rowland's daughter. So there's a little piece of John. At least you got a little recognition.
I had a hard time with that movie. I just felt like it was...
This is Atomic Blonde you're talking about.
Yeah, Atomic Blonde. I felt it was a very decadent film for someone who wants to watch a woman get beat up a lot, It was kind of rough for me to watch. It had a fantastic soundtrack, but it was real throw a chick around kind of movie.
Well, she threw some people around as well.
Well, absolutely she did. It was just... when I watch fight scenes in other films with men fighting, they tend not to get, just thrown around like rag dolls as much, I feel like. They hit each other.
Yeah, and she had great outfits as well. I thought that she looked really good,
Well, she was good in it.
Yeah,
I kind of hated her hair, but that's just me. But I did love her outfits.
Maybe we need a best hair next year.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a hair and makeup category, but just why be so broad? It could just be hair for one single character.
Right. I mean, why are those lumped together?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, it's my fault.
Who always has bad hair is Jennifer Lawrence. I've noticed. She always looks like she's wearing a wig. Any comments on that?
Yeah, in Mother, she looks like she was wearing a wig. What did is that what you were thinking about, Paul?
Emily, thank you. You picked up on my segue. That was my. Emily,
she picked up what you were laying down.
Oh, I know you from way back, Paul.
Well, first of all, I know that the other 3 of us did. Thadra, did you see Mother by any chance?
I did not see Mother.
I didn't either.
Oh, I thought you saw it. Okay.
Who directed that movie?
Aronofsky.
Yeah,
that's
why
Darren Aronofsky who did it.
That's right.
See, this is why Emily wanted to see it.
Yeah, because I like him.
Do you?
I like him too.
Deep, dark, painful. So, Paul, why didn't you see it? And Thadra, why didn't you see it?
Well, I didn't see it because I sort of gave up on him. So after Requiem for a Dream, I thought I don't really want to be put through anything that brutal. But I was always a fan, It was funny to watch the Facebook posts about Mother. People were like, oh my God, this is... And then other people were just really violently opposed to it. And I thought, I don't even want to go there yet. So I'm just not ready. So that's my response.
How about you, Thadra?
I'm just painting myself as the uber feminazi of the conversation here, but I really don't like that director, and I think that he really doesn't like women. Well, he really likes them when they're very brunette and from behind, but otherwise, his movies are really misogynist. I feel like him and the guy who directed Black Snake Moan and Hustle and Flow, both of them, I just don't watch anything they do because I just don't want to watch their female characters.
Yeah, Black Snake Moan definitely falls in that category.
I love Black Snake Moan. I love that movie.
Yeah.
But I have no opinion of the director. But I think the majority of these directors, you're correct. I think they are misogynist. Like, all of those Thomas Anderson, whatever, Payne movies, I think they're all misogynist.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, sometimes I can overlook it and just sort of appreciate whatever else they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, there were things in Requiem for a Dream that I thought were very clever, but kind of after a while I just got tired of it, and I was like, I don't think I like you as a person, and so I kind of just don't want to watch your art anymore,
And I think he sort of had that kind of, and I'm going into the New York zone, he had that sort of like, I went to NYU, haha, and I'm going to make a film, and it's going to fuck you up. And I remember seeing that movie, I think it was at the Angelica, and people were fainting. They were fainting during that movie. And I thought, wow, shit.
Back in the day.
I think there's something about him that's not quite right, and I think, his recent movies, he's going to that realm where it's like it's not about us anymore, and it's just about him. And So I kind of I think it was The Wrestler was my last one, and that was it. I didn't see Black Swan, and I didn't see Mother. It's just like...
Well, it's funny that you sort of a good segue into the conversation about that, directors. This is something touched on one of the earlier podcasts this year, that directors were, is always working through the issues, and for some of them it's their issues with women, some of them it's issues with like their mother, some of them it's, their issues with themselves that they're trying to figure out. And I think, like Catherine Bigelow, who's nominated, in the Aceys for Excellence in Direction, I think Catherine Bigelow has issues with violence. And, I've actually heard her, someone who knows her personally, like I don't know who's worked with her, I should say, not really knows her personally, but has worked with her, that their theory is that she's a little bit of a sadist and that her films are all explorations of her sadism. So that's another like interesting take. You're like, wow.
Well, good for her. I mean, what's his name? Who did... Wes Anderson. I mean, he has so many fucking father issues. It's ridiculous. Any movie he makes is about his daddy issues. You look him up. Look it up on the Google. No, but seriously, I'm always like, I'm watching his movie, and I feel like I should be getting paid, because he's dealing with his like fucking daddy issues. And he does not like women. Women are so peripheral in all of his movies. I don't care what anybody says.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, let's talk for a second about aside from the potential, possible rumored sadism of Catherine Bigelow, we did have some women nominated
Detroit.
for. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was like, wait, which one did she direct? Okay, Detroit. Got it. Seen it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And what did you think of it? I think it got 2 nominations, if I'm not mistaken.
Direction
one
and
for
film.
Excellence in Direction and one for the screenplay.
Or for the film, I think overall. But so I mean, did you enjoy it? It was sort of it was somewhere in between your big action film and a smaller thing. What did you think? 5 nominations actually for Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought, I felt like sometimes with films, I feel like they're just a really good public service. The fact that this film was made, that this story was talked about, is just in its own, regardless of how artful it was, someone made a film about it. I felt the same way about Fruitvale. It's like that should be, everyone should know about this incident that happened.
It's amazing
really
that people
well
don't. It's amazing that people don't, right? I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't actually, I had a lot of problems with Fruitvale. I knew a bit more about the story. I didn't know anything about Detroit before I saw the film. But I was just really glad that they made a film out of it. And I was really glad that, I'm blanking on the name of the main actor, Michael B. Jordan, had a main part because I love him. But yeah, so Detroit, same thing. I was very excited that it was made into a film. It's a good little historical, it's well done historical bit of filmmaking. I thought the cinematography and the costumes and everything were very nice, ambient. I felt like I was very much placed there. It's not cheerful.
Sure.
It's not a happy story. I didn't leave there
No.
thinking.
No, it feels like it's it's a story from whatever 40 years ago that could have taken place last week. It feels no different than
Absolutely.
It makes you. That's the overwhelming thought you have when you're leaving the theater is like, oh, like nothing has changed
No.
over time, basically, except for maybe more aware of it in theory now. Hey, let's talk for a second. Let's go back and talk about some the actors. You mentioned Michael B. Jordan from was somebody that we saw in Creed and Fruitvale and so on recently. But this year's acting award, our main performance award, best performance in a major role, has some incredible performances in it. But I feel like they're all going to get sort of overwhelmed by Frances McDormand in Three Billboards. And Paul, I know that you must have something to say about that.
Me?
Yeah.
Well,
'Cause I don't think you liked it very much.
Frances McDormand?
Well, Three Billboards as a
No, I hated everything about it. You couldn't sell me that for anything. And I thought she was just mean, right? There was nothing really, no character really redeemed him or herself. And I just couldn't understand why I was supposed to care about her and her plight. She didn't even like her daughter. They just all seemed miserable, right? And then it just seemed like it was like an advertisement for vigilantism, which I thought, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't had a film like that in a long time, I think.
No, it's been a while.
But no, what was the Gran Torino? I think that's the last major vigilante film.
Yeah, but they remade Death Wish? Isn't that coming out with?
Yeah, that's for 2018. So we're on a roll with vigilantism.
Yeah.
So
I
maybe
thought
that'll be next year's theme.
I was really sad about Three Billboards because I just felt alone, right? And I couldn't latch onto it, on any level. And I just walked away thinking that was just mean, and not in the way that I wanted, right? I like being depressed and sad after a movie, but I just couldn't get into it in any way. And I thought she was just I don't know. I think she wanted to play that character, and she did, but I don't know. I don't see what
There's a lot. I think there's a lot of hurt in that character.
Yeah, and I like that she looked real. That was good, and it certainly wasn't a glamorous role, and I respect that. But I like that you guys had the Brooklyn Prince from Florida Project. That was good.
Yeah, I feel a little bad that we did not include in here Haley Lou Richardson from Columbus. I think that's probably one of the more notable snubs.
Yeah,
it's like we're getting to the point now in year 3 where we have snubs. So anyway, I know that Paul, that you like Melanie Linsky. Thadra, what sort of any acting performances in any of the categories that really stood out to you this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I did not see Three Billboards. I love Frances McDormand, but that's fine. I was really, really impressed with Allison Janney in I, Tonya. I thought she was fantastic, and just so I loved that movie very much. I have friends who thought it was glorifying domestic violence, which I can see where you would get that, but I think that it was just viewing a tragic childhood with a sense of humor, which is what a lot of people with tragic childhoods do.
Yeah. Well, it's a slow motion, watching a car accident done in a humorous way. Darkly humorous way, right?
It's how you process pain, you know?
Right,
it's sort of a healthy coping mechanism, and so I thought it was presented fantastically. But I also was really impressed with Lakeith Stanfield in Get Out. I'm very excited that he made the ballot for that, because he was just trapped deep in there, and you could just see it in him the whole time. I remember walking from the theater remarking on him and how amazed I was by his performance.
Yeah, he really was good.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say John Boyega was nominated for Best New or Overlooked Talent, and I had a little problem with that, because I was like, if you are the main character in Star Wars, you no longer qualify as overlooked.
I don't know, because I would say that, what's her name from Star Wars, who's also nominated?
Daisy Ridley.
Daisy Ridley. That Daisy Ridley is still, people don't really know who she is. I mean, they know, they're like, I recognize her. She's at that stage, as is John Boyega. But I still don't think they're at a stage where people...
No, Will, we're old.
Oh, we're old.
The young people.
The young people.
To be fair, John Boyega is kind of all over the place, I feel like. And I love him. My Attack the Block is my favorite Alien movie ever. But but I feel like he's getting a lot of parts. I can't even think of anything else I've seen her in.
She was in Murder on the Orient Express. Actually, she was great in it.
Oh, let's see? I didn't see it.
I didn't see that, and I'm not sure I want to. Do we need to see that, Will?
It actually, I had low expectations. You know, I hate remakes. I hate remakes in general, and it just didn't really seem like, I hate anything with a bunch of A-list stars in it playing every character. But that being said, it actually is pretty well done. Kenneth Branagh made a pretty good Poirot. So that's right away, like that helps the whole thing move along, and the character actors with their A-list talents were better than I thought. Like people loved the movie Lincoln. I hated it for all those reasons that I just mentioned, but I think this remake of Murder on the Orient Express was actually more credible and more enjoyable, despite the same sort of A-list talent, through and through. Just speaking of snubs and A-list talent. And glorifying domestic violence, all things that we've touched on in the last couple of minutes. I know there was a snub for you, Thadra, in the performance, because I know that you liked Gary Oldman. You just like Gary Oldman.
Yes, I was very surprised that he didn't make that ballot. I was going to bring that up. I mean, he was really, really good in that movie.
Are you sure it just wasn't his makeup? Because that was extraordinary.
The makeup was extraordinary, but I mean, even the way that he moved his mouth, like he restructured the way that he moved his facial muscles when he talked, and I thought he was. It's a very, very tiny moment in time. It was interesting. I'm not, a lot of the times with biopic films or historical films, I don't walk away thinking, wow, that was a great movie. I just feel like I saw a moment in time illustrated. But his performance stood out to me. I certainly wouldn't have voted for it as a best film, but I definitely would have voted for Gary Oldman if he'd been nominated for the Oscar. Or for that actor.
Sure.
Fascinating.
He was nominated for the Oscar and he did win. So
he won.
He
won.
Yeah. He's not completely snubbed.
Poor guy.
But I I wanted that guy.
Poor guy, he's settled for just the Oscar and not the Acey, which is really, unfortunate.
Well,
it's lower award.
Last week, for no good reason, I had this memory thing where I remembered the movie Sid and Nancy, right? Great movie.
Sure.
Right? And he's amazing in it. But I was like, wow, what kind of fucked up world do we live in where he's winning Oscars for movies that you couldn't pay me to see, and Chloe Webb, who played Nancy, is nowhere. That's fucked up.
What is she doing now?
The mom on Shameless?
She was the mother on Shameless. I think that was the last thing she did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, to me, her role, they were head to head in that movie, and it's just interesting to think how a male career goes versus a female career.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's cruel, really, and I think she's amazing, and I thought she was just so great in that. I thought, I got to look at his fucking prune face in a movie, and you know, she's probably still auditioning for roles. It makes no sense.
Well, you know, she did the Twins and Ghostbusters too, and I think that may have derailed her career a little bit.
I mean, she was definitely more of one of those kind of eccentric actresses, which Hollywood probably just didn't know what to do with. But so what? Yeah.
Right. She also did The Belly of an Architect, which is, you know.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Like any of us has any idea what The Belly of an Architect is.
All right, you're basically proving what I've said wrong. Don't forget it.
But
I mean, but that doesn't necessarily completely fault her for all of those script choices. Those could have been like what she got, and that would.
Oh no, it
you know?
definitely
Right.
is. It's not like there's a big clamor when for the women perceived as being not quite able to carry a picture what they get offered, and then as they age, those offers get worse and worse. It's
Right.
really terrible.
And I mean,
We've discussed this before.
Chloe Webb isn't the most conventionally, societally, media beautiful woman. I mean, she's a very pretty lady, but she's got a very specific look and a specific voice, and you can get away with that when you're a guy.
Sure.
You can be funny looking and get all sorts of main parts. But not that she's funny looking, but
No, you're right.
I see a lot of films with my mom, and she's constantly pointing out to me, you would never see someone that ugly as a female role, But
You mean in terms of men?
In terms of men, yeah. So
Totally, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's what I said about Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman isn't like a total classic looker himself.
No.
But he gets all kinds of parts.
All kinds of parts.
Yeah.
And she should have been that same sort of character actress, which she was. She was essentially a supporting character actress, which is great. Those are my favorite kind of actors. The small, like Ned Beatty, whatever, Lee Grant. Like, those are my favorite kind of like actors. Those little guys that pop up everywhere, and you're like, oh my god, that's amazing. But
No, I love the character actors.
So and Thadra, this is totally interesting that you go see movies with your mom, since I think that this year's Aceys, Oscars, films in general is the year of the mother-daughter film. Like it was surprising to me. Like there's so many movies that are about the mother-daughter relationship. Lady Bird, I, Tonya, Columbus, The Florida Project,
3 Billboards,
and
Patty
Three
Cakes,
Billboards, Patty Cakes.
Yeah.
None of
and
which
Mother
I
isn't
saw with my mom.
Wow.
Are you? By the way, this is a segue. I mean, just as an aside, is there stuff that you're afraid to see with your mom? She's that kind of mom.
Oh no. We'll see. We went and saw it. We saw Get Out. We just went and saw Black Panther. We see all sorts of stuff.
Oh, nice. Well, because my parents they insisted on taking me to see Young Frankenstein at the drive-in back in the day, and they cussed and made faces every time someone swore in the film.
Wait, wow! I could be
So
that.
it was not, and I was dying. I was just like, I thought it was the most hilarious thing, but I felt compelled not to laugh during it. But anyway,
My parents, they stopped going to theaters after The Exorcist because they were so upset that she vomited on the priest.
Wow.
So I was like,
That was
wow.
a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean,
anyways,
like with film choices with mom, it really doesn't actually factor in whether, mom will see anything, it's fine, but I like to, if I'm going to, I only have so many moments that I can go see movies in the theater, and if I'm going to, I tend to go for films that I expect to be a spectacle, because I can watch something later on my computer or my television, that isn't going to be
Right.
big, and so
That's
why I would go see It or John Wick or something like that.
Sure.
Which
sure.
Mom saw John Wick with me as well, but because it's going to be big
Yeah,
and
I
flashy
mean-
and much more fun to watch in the theaters.
I mean, the thing is, though, it's a funny thing. It's like we've now bifurcated into these big action and sci-fi and whatever films in the theater, and then these relationship films, and it's sort of like there's almost nothing that crosses, in the middle ground. But it was just sort of like a I don't know where we're headed in regards to that. Like, are we going to end up with only all the low budget films will be like these relationship films, and all of the big budget films will be John Wick? Like, I'm not sure.
Well, I hope not. Like I was thinking about something like Columbus, where it was so beautiful. And it's such a shame if we're all reduced to seeing it, on television, or worse, like on a tablet in bed,
on the airplane,
or on the airplane, something like that. Some of these sort of real, kind of beautiful visions. Like I agree. Like I want to see like something that's gorgeous to look at, like on a big screen, or great to listen to. But it's so hard to tell what's gonna be impressive or not that way.
Yeah, I rented Wonder Woman, and I watched 3 minutes of it, and I shut it because I have a good sized television, but wow, I thought this was a movie I should have seen in the theater, and maybe one day I will.
You really failed women everywhere by not seeing it.
Really, you
didn't
miss anything.
Oh my goodness! Your mom's dying to see it, so you should talk to her about this.
I don't think she is. I don't really picture that as a feminist manifesto type of film. It's just a film about a female superhero.
Right.
Well, I think Wonder Woman, the character as she was written, 60, 70 years ago, I think that was the feminist manifesto, not that the film did anything to really further that.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I mean,
they tried.
Very, very cool that all these theaters all over the U.S. did this. They'd have ladies' night, and then there was a whole thing with the Alamo Draft House in Austin. Did you guys hear about this? Where they had a women's screening, and then all of these men just lost it, like all these men's rights activists, and just flooded them with comments about how discriminatory it was to have this ladies' night. And then the Alamo Draft House, just whoever their social media manager person was just on point. I mean, I probably read 300 comments just because they were so funny the way they were responding to these dudes. But that was
dude,
the whole
every
thing.
night, every night is men's night.
Yeah, well, there was a theater in San Francisco, same thing, and it got all this flack. Like, oh my God, it's so horrible. There's this one night that you're not specifically invited to this movie. Like,
right.
You were gonna go anyway.
Yeah.
Bigger picture.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gents, probably have to maybe have a conversation about just a couple more categories for time. We could do this all day, I'm sure. But just talk for a second. I don't know. What do you think? You name a category, Emily, because this is your...
I don't know. I'm just thinking about, what was my favorite movie of the year?
Yeah, that's probably a good place to go.
It's
not necessarily the best. What was your favorite?
My favorite... I don't know. Okay, so I loved Mother just as a
because it's crazy.
Because it's crazy. I mean, and also I didn't think it was misogynist at all. I actually felt like it really told an allegorical story of the plight of womanhood in a truthful and awful way. I thought it was really good. But I don't want to watch it again, so I wouldn't say that it was my favorite movie of the year.
Right.
But so I think what movie do I want to stay with me? I mean, I loved I, Tonya. I loved the pace of it. That mother-daughter relationship is interesting, and I don't think it glorifies. Honestly, I don't think it glorifies much of anything, But it was great entertainment.
I do feel like it was meaningful in a way that it demonstrated that you had this preconceived idea about what you know about your image of Tonya Harding that was so manipulated by the press and the coverage of the sport and the people involved in the sport. And, she was just a misfit that didn't fit in, and that, we're the same characters coming up in the news now. People would be rooting for the underdog. You'd actually be rooting for Tonya Harding, I think, which is that was the message that I got out of the film that I walked away with.
Yeah, I had a very similar reaction. I thought, I remember when this happened, and I remember thinking that she was evil, but it was just, this movie made it so much more complicated. And, the fact that
that's a good word.
They were all against her through the whole thing. I mean, before she even got her career, she was this incredibly talented skater who just could not get a break because no one wanted her because of her upbringing and her nail polish color, you know?
Right.
And her choice of music.
Yeah.
I also loved the square. Actually, it kind of like stayed with me. Did either of you see it?
Nope.
Oh, that's a shame. It was a
Foreign.
sort of. Yeah, a foreign film, and Paul, you've got to see it. It's a sort of, I don't really want to call it a spoof. It's a satire about the art world and about a curator of a museum. I know it's a museum comedy. Curator of a museum who. He gets mugged and he gets his cell phone stolen. So, but at first he thought like the muggers did a really great job stealing his cell phone, like that was a excellent skill they had. But then he's got to get it back, and so here he is, this kind of very privileged guy in a very privileged job that doesn't want to call the police. Instead, he wants to find out the thief on his own, and so he sort of embarks on this. Detective gone wrong into the projects, while at the same time, like everything's going wrong at the museum, which is
nice.
It was a fun story.
Well, I wrote it
Thadra,
down, Emily. So thanks.
Oh, good.
Thadra, how about you? What was your favorite or best film that you saw this year?
It's probably a three-way tie between I, Tonya.
Between John Wick.
Yeah, well, if
One,
I were
two,
being
and three.
honest, but I'm not going to be. So,
I'm just kidding.
I loved I,
I interrupted you, sorry.
Tonya. I'll throw in another little lady comment, which when I was watching I, Tonya, the one thing I thought critical was I don't remember them wearing such thongy costumes. And then at the end of the film, they show footage of actual Tonya Harding skating, and I thought, oh, it's because they didn't. So they sexied their costumes up for the show. But there were several points in that film where I would turn to my friend who's my age and say, no one wore jeans that tight,
right.
or something.
Right.
But otherwise, I loved it. I loved Get Out. It was such a fresh idea. And so well acted and just great. Very entertaining, and I loved The Shape of Water. I know it won the Oscar, but I was really impressed by the setting of that film. It's set in the 50s. They do all of this stuff with costume and furniture and what shows you see on TV and how the advertising art world works, but they also add the racism and misogyny, and those are part of the backdrop that they paint to tell the story, not the story, which I was very impressed with.
Right. In essence, it's a story about racism anyway. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't you think? Yeah.
Absolutely. But just for the sort of, if you're looking at it in a more, I guess, shallow way, and just sort of for the straight narrative, it's all of those moments where he would just say the most evil things to the women and about black people, and when the artist he changed the channel because he didn't want to watch the race riots. They're just depressing, and I just thought it was really simple little details that I don't tend to see. I watch something set in the 50s. They're like, yeah, and they wore this, and their hair looked like this, and this is the color their cars were. But they don't really include that kind of stuff in just the environment of the film.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. I think I agree with you that Get Out, it's the concept of it that's really, not to say that anything else wasn't good or well done, but the concept
Stepford
of it.
Wives. It was the Stepford Wives.
Hello.
Yeah, but
It was. He said it though. He did give the Stepford Wives credit, but still at the end of the day, Get Out was a ton of fun, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And I can't say a bad thing about that movie. But did it deserve Oscar nominations? Probably not. Should it have won? Definitely.
Yeah.
But it was a good it was a good genre film, and he copied he did what I said. He took the template that already exists and just copied it. It's like, don't do this because that'll make a bad movie. Do this and it'll creep everyone out. And, I think it was very succinct and creepy, and I loved it.
Some of the other films mentioned I really enjoyed. Just honorable mention to Brigsby Bear. That's a movie that is just very sort of charming, and it's sort of about childhood dreams as hanging on to them as an adult. It's got a lot of complicated things in it, but just the concept of that. It's the one where the kid grows up to be a 30-something, and he's still watching this children's television show, and he's like writing about it online. He's like the head of the people trying to figure out what the show means, and it's cataloging its universe, and there's people like this, of course, with every show, except for this show. He's the only audience because he's been held captive since he was a small child, and the show is produced by his parents specifically for him. So he's the only person in the world that knows the show and has a love for it. And so a lot of stuff happens in the film, but basically he turns that situation into the show is more important to him than having been kidnapped, basically. So that's an interesting one, well worth seeing. And I loved Columbus. Columbus is, to me, it's the most beautiful film that I saw this year, and the pacing is so slow and in a beautiful way where they're not in a hurry to do anything, but yet it allows the relationships with not only between the people, but between the people and architecture, because it's the architecture of the modernist architecture of the city has a lot to do with the relationships, and they really integrate it. It's not just a backdrop; it becomes a real important part of the story. Yeah, I loved all that about it. But it's still for me, I, Tonya, is like everything a movie should be, in the sense that all the pieces are great and they all fit together and work together to tell you the story in a really unexpected way. I mean, part of that is that I had an expectation that I knew about the story before I saw it, and 15 minutes into the movie, I realized that it wasn't going to be just this romp making fun of Tonya Harding, but instead, turned into a really powerful thing with great acting and camera work inside these. When they're fighting or skating, it's like the camera work just takes you into the film, and then you're still left really feeling for the characters. Can't say enough good things about it. I'm really ashamed with the Academy, who just refuses to nominate anything that's seen as a comedy for its serious awards. It's so rare, and it's such a shame.
I think so. What's the difference in budget between something like I, Tonya and Columbus? It's got to be, I, Tonya has to be 10 times the budget.
Yeah, but I bet you most of the extra budget went into the music.
Yeah.
And the star, music and the star. You get stars that are more expensive, and you get a jukebox movie like that where they have 25 songs that they had to pay for, big money.
Yep.
That's amazingly enough. That's where the budget goes. The shooting of it is the same.
I also thought Columbus was remarkable because it's a directorial debut.
His first film.
That's his first.
For
that's his
Coconato.
first film, and it's gorgeous. It's amazing.
I'd like to say, I totally forgot about I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. So thanks to you guys and the Aceys, I remembered it. And so that was a really great film for me, and one that I watched twice, which I never do. And it's familiar, and it's familiar territory, but Melanie Lynskey, she's awful good in it. And
just to interject for a second, it tells this. It's basically a heist movie, but I saw the premiere at Sundance, and the director had a great quote about the film. He said it's a film where every character is incompetent at whatever they're asked to do. They're not incompetent at everything in life, but just whatever they have to do in the film, and that's where the comedy comes from. And I thought that's a brilliant analysis of that film. So it's a heist movie where nobody's any good at anything.
Yeah, it's a good film for oddballs. It's like underdog weirdos. So I appreciate you guys for reminding me how much I love that movie, and that was a surprise. That was something I stumbled on, and that was great. And thanks.
well, I'm writing that one down, Paul.
It's a bad title. That was the only thing. I think the title's not great, but maybe that's why they did it. So that would be the only bad thing.
It was the title from the beginning, and they thought the whole way through that they were going to change it. And when they got to the end, they all the Netflix people and the producers decided that it was so ridiculous that they were going to keep it.
Like Florida Project, right? That was probably the same thing that they just called it Florida Project.
Probably.
Yeah.
Hey, so Thadra, I'm going to give you your last word on the Aceys and the films, and it could be I'm so excited about film, or it could be I'm totally not excited about film, or it could be I got to go now. But I'll give it to you.
I mean, I love film. I'm very excited about film. The nice thing about doing the Aceys is I get to hear about all these films I've never heard of. Sometimes I'm a bit of a shut-in because I'm a writer, so I spend a lot of time at home. So I just make a list based on the entire ballot of stuff that I want to go see. So, in this conversation, you brought up all sorts of films that I didn't see last year. So
Yep.
I'm excited to watch them. I'm excited to see what comes out this year. I hope that there's another John Wick coming soon. And I was just commenting the other day that I'm thrilled that they're starting to put easy chairs, recliners in theaters, because I feel like that means that they're sort of reviving everyone's interest in going to movies, and I don't ever want to not go to movies, and I get scared when they go digital or, they started doing DVDs or whatever, that people were just going to watch them at home. I just want to keep going to theaters. I just think going to a movie is just one of the joys.
Here, here.
There you go. There you go.
Here.
Paul, you got anything to add to that, or should we leave it on that note?
Leave on that note, I will say I did go to a reclining movie theater in Seattle, and it was one of the best experiences ever.
Yeah.
Here's to
Mom and I
recliners.
only go to that theater.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hey, Thadra, you mentioned, the list of Aceys films. There's 73 films nominated this year for something in the Aceys. And because we know that it becomes people's list for things to see, we made a nice spreadsheet that has all the films listed, and it tells you what they're nominated for, and it shows you trailer links for them, and also where you can watch them, because almost all of them are available in some way online, if not in the theater. And so that's something to look for at theaceys.org. That'll be on our front page there shortly. And you guys have been a wonderful addition to the podcast today, and I'd like to say you will be allowed to come back.
Oh, thanks.
And I want to say,
Yay!
Maybe I'll figure out my computer by then.
oh, yay! And Paul, you've been doing very well on your recovery from the curmudgeonly.
Hope I didn't curse too much.
Fuck that.
Cursing is
And Thadra, you recovered
guys.
nicely from your technology too, so that's good.
Nice
Oh,
chatting.
awesome.
All right. Well, I expect you to get your ballots in. Voting is open now for the Aceys. You can go to theaceys.org, and there's a ballot on there where you can go if you're a voting registered member of the Aceys. If you're not, you can.
Email us
At
anything you want, because it all goes to us anyway, at theaceys.org. How about membership at theaceys.org? How about I got something to say at theaceys.org?
about reclining chair or John Wick.
John Wick at theaceys.org.
Yay!
Okay, Thadra, Paul, thank you very much. Emily, for being with us. And this is going to be it for this edition of the Aceys podcast. We'll be back with the awards announcement in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that and look forward to seeing the winners.
Very exciting, very exciting.
Bye.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. You did great. Okay, bye.
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 In that spirit, go out and see some movies.
I'll bring the popcorn.
You love popcorn.
Of course, who doesn't like popcorn?
Everybody likes popcorn. Hey, podcast listeners. Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/theaceys. That's THEACYS, or at theaceys.org. I'm your host, Wil Masisak, saying see you next time on the Aceys podcast.